My name is Olivette Rayner. I am 78 years old. And the night I learned that love could hurt this deep, I was sitting on my bed, holding my chest, while the people I loved most walked away like I meant nothing. Before I tell you how I got there, listen to me for a moment. If you love deep, emotional stories like this, stories that come from the heart, please subscribe to this channel. Like this video, turn on the notification button so you don't miss what comes next. And tell me in the comments what part of the country you're watching from, so I know who is sitting with me tonight. Now let me tell you the truth. I thought love was sacrifice. I thought love was patience. I thought love meant staying, no matter how much it hurt. I was wrong. Because when love turned its back on me that night, I finally understood pain in a way I never had before. And what happened next is something I never saw coming. The room was quiet, but my heart was loud. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the handkerchief in my lap. My daughter stood by the door. My son stood behind her. Neither of them looked at me. That hurt more than their words. "I can't do this anymore," my daughter said. Her voice was calm, too calm. I looked up at her. "Do what, baby?" She sighed, like I was slow, like I was a problem she was tired of explaining. "Love you like this," she said. Those words hit me hard. Love you like this. My son crossed his arms. "Mama, you're too much. Everything with you is heavy." Heavy? That was the word he chose. I felt something crack inside my chest. "I loved you," I whispered. "I still love you." My daughter shook her head. "You don't even know what love is." I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Then she said the words that broke me. "Your love hurts people." I felt the air leave my body. That was the moment. The exact moment. I didn't know love could hurt this deep. They turned and walked out of my room. And when the door closed, I slid down onto the bed and cried like I hadn't cried in years. But that was only the beginning. Let me take you back. I was not always this woman with shaking hands and tired eyes. Once I was full of hope. I married young. I married believing love was enough. I believed if I gave everything, everything would work out. Their father was charming at first. He laughed loud. He promised big. But slowly love became sharp. Words became weapons. Silence became punishment. I stayed. I stayed because I thought children needed both parents. I stayed because I believed love meant endurance. I stayed because I didn't want to fail. But one night, after a scream turned into something worse, I took my children and left. No money, no plan. Just love. From that day on, love became my whole life. I worked long hours. I cooked tired meals. I kissed scraped knees. I stayed up late helping with homework. I prayed over their beds when they were sick. I gave them everything. And I never asked for anything back. I thought love didn't need payment. As they grew older, something changed. They started calling less, visiting less, listening less. When I spoke, they cut me off. When I worried, they sighed. When I needed help, they said, "Later." Still, I loved. I loved when they ignored me. I loved when they blamed me. I loved when they forgot me. Because I thought love meant staying soft. I didn't see how love was hurting me. The night they said my love was the problem came after weeks of tension. I had asked a simple question. "Why don't you come around anymore?" I said. My daughter rolled her eyes. My son looked away. "You're always emotional," he said. "I'm your mother," I replied. "That's the problem," my daughter said. That was when the room changed. She told me I was controlling. She told me I made them feel guilty. She told me my love was suffocating. Every word felt like a slap. "I just wanted to care for you," I said. She shook her head. "Your care feels like a cage." I felt something tear inside me. All those years. All those nights. All that love. A cage. That was when my son said, "We need space from you." Space. From me. I laughed softly, because my heart couldn't accept it yet. You mean for a while? I asked. No, my daughter said, for good. That was when my chest started hurting. Not emotional pain. Real pain. I pressed my hand against my heart and tried to breathe. And instead of coming to help me, they walked away. That night, alone in my room, I realized something terrible. I had given love without limits, and they had learned how to take without care. I whispered into the darkness. I didn't know love could hurt this deep. But what I didn't know yet, what I was about to discover, was that love wasn't the only thing I had given them. And what they were planning next would cut even deeper. Because the next morning, I would overhear something that would change everything. Something no mother is ready to hear. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I did not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my daughter's face as she said, "Your love hurts people." Those words kept repeating in my head, slow and cruel, like they were being carved into my bones. By morning, my chest still felt tight. Not the sharp pain from the night before, but something heavy, something bruised. I sat up slowly and placed my feet on the floor. The house felt different. Too quiet, too empty, like it already knew something had broken. I walked to the kitchen and put water on the stove. I reached for 3 cups out of habit, then stopped. I stood there staring at them until my eyes burned. "They're grown," I whispered to myself. "They're grown." But my heart didn't listen. When the tea was ready, I sat at the table alone. The same table where I had packed lunches, helped with homework, wiped tears, and prayed silently while they ate. I traced the wood with my finger, remembering small hands, loud laughter, spilled juice. How did love turn into this? As the sun rose, I remembered what happened right after they left my room. I had stayed sitting on the bed for a long time, listening to their footsteps fade down the hallway. I waited for one of them to come back, just one, to say, "Mama, we didn't mean it." To say, "Are you okay?" No one came. That hurt more than their words. Around mid-morning, I heard voices outside my door. Low voices, careful voices. I held my breath. My daughter said, "We should do it now before she starts crying again." My son replied, "Yeah, let's just handle it." Handle it. I stood slowly and moved closer to the door, my heart pounding. "What if she gets sick again?" My daughter whispered. My son sighed. "That's not our fault." "Not your fault." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. "She's too attached," my daughter continued. "Her love is overwhelming." Overwhelming. That word felt heavier than a stone. "We'll take care of things," my son said. "She doesn't need to know everything." I stepped back, my legs shaking. They were talking about me like I was already gone. That was the moment I realized something terrible. They were not just walking away from my love. They were planning life without me in it. Later that day, my daughter knocked on my door. Her voice was gentle again, like nothing had happened. "Mama, are you feeling better?" she asked. I opened the door slowly. "I'm breathing." She smiled weakly. "That's good." She glanced around my room, then said, "We think it might be best if you rest more. You've been emotional." Emotional. That word again. "I'm hurt," I said. "There's a difference." She didn't answer. "We'll help you with things," she continued. "Bills, appointments, decisions." I looked at her. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because we care." But her eyes didn't match her words. I nodded slowly. "I need time." She looked relieved. "Of course." After she left, I sat back on my bed and stared at the wall. For the first time, a thought came to me that scared me. What if my love had trained them to ignore my pain? I had always put their feelings first, always swallowed mine, always explained their behavior away. They're tired. They didn't mean it. They'll understand one day. But what if they already understood, and just didn't care. That afternoon, I went through old photos, albums I hadn't opened in years. I saw myself younger, smiling wide, holding bobbies with hope in my eyes. I saw birthday cakes I stayed up late to bake, school plays I sat through alone, hospital rooms where I held their hands and told them everything would be okay. Was that love harmful? Or was it just inconvenient now? As evening came, my son returned home briefly. He avoided my eyes. "Mama," he said, standing in the doorway, "we're thinking of rearranging things around here." "Why?" I asked. "To make life easier," he replied. "For who?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "You should try not to worry so much. Stress is bad for your heart." I almost laughed. I placed my hand over my chest. "You didn't worry when it hurt last night." He shifted uncomfortably. "You're being dramatic." That word again. Dramatic. Emotional. Overwhelming. All the words used when someone wants you quiet. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. I realized something painful. I had taught my children that my pain was background noise. I had loved them so loudly that they stopped hearing me. In the early hours of the morning, I whispered to myself, I didn't know love could hurt this deep. But deep down, I felt something else growing. Not anger. Awareness. And the next day, that awareness would turn into something I was not prepared for. Because the next thing I would find, the thing hidden behind their gentle voices and careful smiles, would show me that love was not the only thing at risk. And once I saw it, I would never look at my children the same way again. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The morning light came in soft through the curtains, but my heart felt heavy. I lay still for a long time, listening to the house. The clock ticked. A car passed outside. Somewhere far away, someone laughed. Life was moving forward like nothing had happened, like my world hadn't cracked open the night before. I finally sat up and placed my feet on the floor. For years, I had started my days thinking about my children, what they needed, what they might forget, what I could fix before they asked. That morning, something was different. I did not rush. I breathed. I stood slowly and walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at me had gray hair pulled back neatly and deep lines around her eyes. She looked tired, yes, but there was something else there too, something awake. "Good morning, Olivette," I whispered. Hearing my own name out loud felt strange. I couldn't remember the last time anyone said it with kindness. I went to the kitchen and made breakfast. Simple, toast and tea. I ate slowly, tasting each bite, reminding myself I was still here, still alive, still capable of feeling even if it hurt. As I sat there, my mind returned to the voices I heard the day before. "We should do it now. She doesn't need to know everything. Her love is overwhelming." What was it? That question would not leave me alone. I walked down the hallway and stopped in front of the small room at the end. The door was slightly open. This room used to be a storage space, but over time my children had taken over. Old boxes, files, papers they said were important. I had never gone through them. I trusted them. That thought made my chest tighten. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Dust floated in the air. The room smelled like paper and old cardboard. I stood there for a moment, unsure, like I was crossing a line I had never crossed before. Then I reminded myself of something. They cross lines first. I knelt down and opened the nearest box. Inside were folders, neatly labeled. My name appeared on several of them. My heart began to beat faster. I picked one up and opened it. At first, it looked harmless. Bills, statements, letters from places I recognized. Then I saw documents I did not remember signing. Pages with dates from months ago. Pages with my name typed at the top, but handwriting at the bottom that was not mine. My hands started to shake. I sat back on my heels and took a deep breath. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I opened another folder. More papers. More decisions made without me. Words like care, support, management. They talked about me like I was a task. Like I was something that needed handling. I felt dizzy. This was what they meant by doing it now. This was what they meant by handling it. They were not just stepping away from my love. They were stepping over me. I stood up slowly and leaned against the wall, pressing my hand to my chest. My heart thudded hard, but I forced myself to stay calm. Think, Olivet, think. I gathered the folders carefully and placed them back where I found them. I did not want them to know I had seen anything yet, not until I understood more. That afternoon, my daughter came into the kitchen. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mama, did you eat?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "That's good," she said quickly. "You need to take care of yourself." I looked at her. "You didn't seem worried last night." Her smile faded just a little. "That was different." "Different how?" I asked. She hesitated. "You were emotional." "I was in pain," I said softly. She sighed. "See, that's what I mean." I felt something shift inside me. "So when I hurt," I said, "it becomes a problem." She frowned. "Mama, please don't twist my words." "I'm not twisting anything," I replied. "I'm finally listening." She looked uncomfortable now. "We just want what's best for you." I nodded slowly. "Then you should include me." She didn't answer. Instead, she said, "You should rest today, don't stress yourself." And then she walked away. I stood there alone, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. They kept telling me to rest. But what they really wanted was for me to stay quiet. Later that day, my son returned from work. He dropped his bag near the door and barely looked at me. "We'll be going out later," he said, "just so you know." "Where?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just errands." With the folders still fresh in my mind, I felt a chill. "About me?" I asked. He stopped and looked at me sharply. "Why would you say that?" "Because everything lately has been about me," I replied. "Without me." He shook his head. "You're overthinking." That word again. Overthinking. I watched him walk away, and something clear settled in my chest. They were preparing. That evening, I went back to my room and locked the door. I sat on the bed and opened my old handbag, the one I rarely used anymore. Inside were things I kept close. My wedding band, old letters, a small notebook I had once used for prayers. I took out the notebook. Then I picked up a pen. My hands trembled, but I started writing anyway. I wrote down what I heard, what I saw, what I felt. I wrote dates, words, moments. Because if they were building a story about me, I needed my own record. As I wrote, memories returned. Times they told me, "Don't worry, Mama, we've got it." Times they rushed me to sign things. Times they said, "You won't understand this." I had thought it was care. Now I saw it was control. Tears slipped down my face, but I kept writing. This was not the pain of heartbreak alone. This was the pain of waking up. Late that night, I heard my children talking again. Their voices were low, but the house was quiet enough for sound to travel. "She's calmer today," my daughter said. "Good," my son replied, "as long as she doesn't start asking questions." I closed my eyes. As long as she doesn't ask questions. I felt something harden inside me. I had spent my whole life teaching my children to ask questions, to speak up, to protect themselves. And now they wanted me silent. I lay back on my bed and stared at the ceiling. "I didn't know love could hurt this deep," I whispered. But now I understood something else too. Love was what was hurting me anymore. It was the realization that my love had been used against me. And the next day, I would stop pretending I didn't see it. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And what I would do next, the questions I would finally ask, would change the balance between us forever. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I woke up before anyone else the next morning. The house was quiet in a way that felt careful, like it was holding its breath. I lay still for a few minutes, listening. No footsteps, no voices, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock in the hallway. For years, I used mornings to prepare myself for everyone else. Today, I prepared myself for the truth. I got out of bed slowly and washed my face. As I looked at my reflection, I noticed how tired my eyes were. Not tired from age, but tired from holding things in for too long. You see now, I whispered to myself. I dressed in simple clothes and went to the kitchen. I made breakfast as usual, but this time I paid attention to everything. The way my hands moved, the way my breathing slowed when I focused. I wanted to remember this version of myself, the one who was awake. As I was pouring tea, my daughter walked in. "Morning, Mama," she said, too cheerful. "Morning," I replied. She watched me closely, like she was checking for something. Weakness, tears, confusion. "You slept okay?" she asked. "I slept enough," I said. She smiled, relieved. "Good, that's good." Something about that made my stomach tighten. She sat down at the table and opened her phone. "We'll be busy today," she said casually, "so don't worry if we're in and out." "In and out where?" I asked. She shrugged. "Just errands." There it was again. That vague word, errands. I nodded slowly. "All right." She stood up and kissed my cheek quickly before leaving the room. Her touch felt rushed, almost guilty. After breakfast, I went back to the small room at the end of the hall. The door was closed now. That stopped me. They never closed that door. My heart beat faster as I reached for the handle. It was locked. Locked. I stood there staring at it for a long moment, my hand still on the knob. My chest felt tight, but I forced myself to breathe. They were hiding something. And hiding means fear. I walked back to my room and sat on the bed, trying to think clearly. I opened my notebook again and reread what I had written the night before. The words steadied me, reminded me that I was not imagining things. I decided to test something. I decided to ask a question. When my son came home later that afternoon, I met him in the living room. "You locked the storage room," I said calmly. He froze for half a second before recovering. "Yeah, some private stuff in there." "Private from me?" I asked. He sighed. "Mama, you don't need to worry about everything." That familiar tone again, patient, dismissive. "I live in this house," I said. "Nothing here should be private from me." He shifted uncomfortably. "You're getting worked up." "I'm asking," I replied. He looked at me carefully now, like he was deciding something. "We're just trying to help you." "By locking doors?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "You should rest. Doctor said stress isn't good for you." I stared at him. "What doctor?" I asked. His eyes flickered. "The last one you saw," he said quickly. That was a lie. I felt it in my bones. I had not seen a doctor recently. Not with him, not with my daughter. "So you've been talking to doctors about me?" I asked quietly. He sighed again. "You're twisting things." "I'm listening," I said. He walked away without answering. That was all the answer I needed. That evening, as the sun went down, I sat in my room with the light off, listening. I heard my children moving around the house, whispering, opening drawers, closing doors softly. Planning. At one point, my daughter said, "She seems calm today." My son replied, "As long as she stays calm, we're fine." Fine. Like I was something unstable they were trying to manage. I pressed my hand to my chest and felt my heart beating strong and steady. I was calm, not because I was weak, but because I was seeing clearly. Later that night, I heard the front door open and close. I waited a few minutes, then quietly walked down the hallway and peered out the window. Their car pulled away. They had left. Together. I didn't know where they were going, but I knew one thing. They were doing something without me again. I stood there in the dark for a long time, my reflection faint in the glass. My face looked older in the dim light, but my eyes looked sharper. I went back to my room and opened my handbag. I took out my notebook and pen and wrote again. They locked the room. They talked about doctors. They are planning something. Writing it down made it real. As I closed the notebook, I felt a wave of grief wash over me, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that settles deep in your chest and stays. I thought about my children when they were little, how they used to crawl into my bed when they were scared, how they trusted me with everything. When did that trust flip? When did love become something to manage? I lay down and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Somewhere between midnight and morning, a decision formed in my heart. I would not confront them yet. Not until I understood everything. I would watch. I would listen. I would prepare. Because love had already hurt me deeply. But what they were doing now, this wasn't love at all. And when the truth finally came out, when I finally saw what was behind that locked door, nothing between us would ever be the same again. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I did not sleep much that night. Every sound in the house felt louder than it should have been. The ticking clock, the pipes shifting, the wind brushing against the window. My body lay still, but my mind kept walking up and down that hallway, stopping in front of the locked door again and again. By morning, my eyes were sore, but my thoughts were steady. They were hiding something from me. And whatever it was, they believed I could not handle it. That belief hurt almost as much as their words. I got out of bed and went straight to the kitchen. My daughter was already there, pouring coffee into a travel mug. She smiled when she saw me, but it was the kind of smile people use when they are nervous. "Morning, Mama," she said. "Morning," I replied. She watched me carefully, waiting for something. Tears, anger, confusion. I gave her none of it. "You and your brother were out late," I said calmly. She stiffened just a little. "We had things to take care of." "About me?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Why does everything have to be about you?" That question stung. Because lately, everything was about me. Just never with me included. "I live here," I said, "so yes, I want to know." She took a sip of her coffee and avoided my eyes. "You're overthinking again." That word again. Overthinking. I nodded slowly. "All right." My calm seemed to bother her more than any argument would have. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. "Try to relax today," she said. "Stress isn't good for your heart." The door closed behind her. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the space she had just left. My chest felt tight, but I forced myself to breathe. Relax. How do you relax when love turns into secrets? After breakfast, I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I took out my notebook and read everything I had written so far. Seeing the words on paper gave me strength. They reminded me that what I felt was real. Then I did something I had never done before. I called someone. Not my children. Not a neighbor. An old friend from church. A woman named Bernice who had known me since before my children were grown. "Bernice," I said when she answered, "I need to ask you something." Her voice softened. "What is it, Liv?" I hesitated, then spoke. "If someone starts making decisions for you without telling you, what would you call that?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I'd call it control." That word sat heavy in my chest. "I think my children are doing that to me," I whispered. Bernice sighed. "I was afraid of that." My heart skipped. "You were." She hesitated. "I've seen it happen before, especially when parents get older. It starts with concern, then turns into quiet decisions." I swallowed hard. "What do I do?" "You pay attention," she said. And you don't sign anything you don't understand. Sign. That word rang in my ears. After the call ended, I sat there shaking, not from fear, but from confirmation. Someone else saw it too. I wasn't imagining this. That afternoon, my son came home earlier than usual. He looked tired, tense. "Mama," he said, "we need to talk." I nodded. "Then talk." He sat across from me, rubbing his hands together. "We've been worried about you." I waited. "You've been emotional," he continued. "And after what happened with your heart the other night." "So now my pain is proof I'm weak?" I asked. He frowned. "That's not what I said." "That's what you meant," I replied quietly. He sighed. "We're just trying to make things easier for you." "By locking doors?" I asked. "By talking to doctors I didn't see?" His head snapped up. "Who told you that?" "You did," I said, "when you lied." His face changed. Not guilt. Fear. He stood up. "You're not thinking clearly." There it was. The sentence I had been dreading. "I am thinking clearly," I said. "That's why you're uncomfortable." He stared at me for a long moment, then said something that made my stomach drop. "Maybe it's time someone else helps you make decisions." The room went quiet. I felt my heart pound in my ears. Someone else like who? He hesitated. "Professionals." I stood up slowly. "You mean strangers?" "They're trained," he said quickly. "To do what?" I asked. "To handle situations like this." "Like this?" "Like me." I took a step closer. "When did I stop being your mother and start being a situation?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his keys. "You're tired, we'll talk later." He left. I stood there shaking, my chest tight, my hands cold. They were moving faster now. That night, I heard the lock on the storage room again. I heard papers rustling, voices low, urgent. I did not go out. I wrote. I wrote everything. Because one truth had become painfully clear. They were not protecting me from harm. They were protecting themselves from my voice. And once that thought settled in my chest, I knew I was standing at the edge of something I could not step away from. Love had already hurt me deeply. But what they were doing now, this would either silence me forever, or force me to finally stand up in a way they could not undo. And the next thing I did would decide which one it would be. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The next morning, the house felt tight. Not quiet. Tight. Like the walls were listening. I woke up with a dull ache in my chest and lay still for a moment, waiting for it to pass. When it did, I sat up slowly and pressed my feet to the floor. I whispered my own name again, just to ground myself. Olivette. I needed to remember who I was before they started deciding who I should be. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, and stared at my reflection. My eyes looked tired, but they were clear. Clear enough to see what was happening. Clear enough to know I wasn't confused. When I stepped into the hallway, the locked door at the end stared back at me like a warning. I walked past it without touching it. Not yet. In the kitchen, my daughter was already there, talking on the phone in a low voice. She turned when she saw me and ended the call quickly. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," I replied. She poured herself coffee, hands shaking just a little. She didn't notice I was watching. "You sleep okay?" she asked. "I slept," I said. "That's not the same thing." She forced a smile. "You should try not to dwell on things." "On what?" I asked. She shrugged. "Everything." That word again. Everything. She picked up her mug and walked out of the room. I listened to her footsteps fade down the hall. A few minutes later, I heard the front door close. I was alone. That was when I moved. I went straight to the small room at the end of the hallway. I stood in front of the locked door and placed my hand on it. The metal was cold. I knocked once. No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. My heart beat faster, but I forced myself to stay calm. I walked back to my room and opened my handbag. Inside was the small key ring I kept with old keys I never used anymore. House keys from years ago, storage keys, things people forget about. I tried one, then another. The third key turned. The lock clicked open. I stood there frozen for a second, my breath caught in my chest. Then I pushed the door open. The room smelled like paper and dust, stronger than before. Boxes were stacked higher now. Folders spread across a small table. Someone had been busy. I stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. My hands shook as I picked up the nearest folder. My name was on it. Inside were papers I had never seen. Plans, notes, lists, some typed, some handwritten. Words jumped out at me. Care plan. Decision support. Best interest. I felt dizzy. I sat down on a chair that had been pushed against the wall and forced myself to breathe slowly. I read every page carefully, even when my eyes burned. There were notes about my health, notes about my emotions, notes about my attachment to my children. One page stopped me cold. It talked about temporary arrangements. Temporary for who? I flipped to the last page. There were names at the bottom. My sons. My daughters. Not mine. My heart felt like it was sinking through the floor. They weren't just planning. They were preparing. Preparing to take over my life. I pressed my hand to my chest as another wave of pain rolled through me. I closed my eyes and breathed until it passed. When I opened them again, something had changed. Fear was still there, but it was no longer alone. Anger had joined it. Quiet anger. Focused anger. The kind that wakes you up. I put everything back exactly how I found it. Every folder, every paper. I locked the door again and returned the key to my bag. Then I sat on my bed and cried. Not loud. Not broken. Just tears sliding down my face as I whispered. I didn't know love could hurt this deep. But this pain was different now. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was betrayal. Late that afternoon, my son came home. He walked in like nothing was wrong, tossing his keys on the table. "Mama," he said, "we need to talk later." "I know," I replied. He paused. "You do?" "Yes," I said. "I know what you're doing." His face went pale. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I stood up slowly. I opened the locked room. Silence filled the house. "You had no right," he snapped. "I had every right," I said calmly. "It's my house, and it's my life." He ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," I said. "You're making plans for me without me." He raised his voice. "We're trying to help you." "By deciding for me?" I asked. "By talking about me like I'm already gone?" His jaw tightened. "You're not thinking straight." I felt my heart pound, but I did not step back. "Say it again," I said quietly. He looked at me, surprised. "Say it again," I repeated. "Look at me and tell me I don't know my own mind." He didn't. Instead, he turned away. "You're tired. We'll talk later." "No," I said. "We'll talk now." He froze. "You love me," I said. "Or at least you say you do. So answer me this. When did my love stop being enough?" He didn't answer. "When did I become a problem instead of your mother?" I asked. Still nothing. My daughter came in then, drawn by the raised voices. "What's going on?" she asked. "I know about the papers," I said. Her eyes widened. "You went through our things," she said. "Our," I repeated. "You mean my life." She crossed her arms. "We're scared for you." "No," I said. "You're scared of losing control." Her voice shook. "You don't get it." "I get it now," I replied. "You think love means ownership." She shook her head. "You're twisting everything." "I've twisted myself for years to make you comfortable," I said. "I'm done." The room felt heavy, thick with words we had never said out loud before. My son spoke softly now. If you keep pushing, this will get harder. That sounded like a warning. I met his eyes. Harder for who? Neither of them answered. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time since they moved back in. I sat on my bed with my notebook open and wrote everything down. The lock, the papers, the words they used, the way they looked at me. I realized something as I wrote. They were not acting like children anymore. They were acting like people with an agenda. And that meant I could not rely on love alone to protect me. As I closed the notebook, my phone buzzed with a message from my daughter. We only want what's best for you. Please stop fighting us. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back one sentence. If you wanted what was best for me, you would have asked me first. I turned the phone off and lay back, staring at the ceiling. Love had already hurt me deeply. But now I knew something even more painful. The people I loved were willing to take my voice if I didn't give it willingly. And the next step I took, the next choice I made, would chain everything between us. Because once trust is broken like this, it never breaks quietly. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The next morning, I woke up to silence. Not the normal silence of an early day, but the kind that feels planned. My door was still locked. I sat up slowly and listened. No voices, no footsteps, no clinking dishes in the kitchen. I placed my hand on my chest and breathed until the tightness eased. Something was different. I stood up, unlocked my door, and stepped into the hallway. The house felt empty, too empty. Their shoes were gone. Their bags were gone. They had left without saying a word. For a moment, I stood there unsure of what I was feeling. Relief came first, then fear followed close behind. When people who want control suddenly step back, it's never because they've given up. It's because they're planning. I went into the kitchen and saw a note on the table. We'll be back later. Please rest. Rest. That word felt like a command now. I crumpled the note in my hand and sat down slowly. My heart was beating fast, but my thoughts were clear. They were giving me space, but not freedom. That morning, I made a decision. I would not wait anymore. I got dressed and picked up my handbag. I checked inside to make sure my notebook was there. It was. I slipped it back in like armor. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway of my house and looked around. I had lived here for years, loved here, suffered here, stayed here. I'm not disappearing, I whispered. Outside, the air felt cool against my skin. I walked slowly to the bus stop, my legs shaky but steady enough. Every step felt heavy, but also important. I went somewhere I hadn't been in a long time. A place where I could speak without being interrupted. The woman who met me had kind eyes and a calm voice. She listened while I talked. I did not rush. I did not cry. I told her everything, from the night my heart hurt to the locked door and the papers. She asked careful questions. I answered honestly. When I finished, she nodded slowly. You did the right thing by coming in yourself, she said. Those words stayed with me. By coming in yourself. I was still myself. When I returned home later that afternoon, their car was already in the driveway. My stomach tightened. They were waiting. I walked inside and found both of them sitting in the living room. My daughter stood up quickly. Where did you go? She asked. I set my bag down. Out. My son frowned. You didn't tell us. I didn't need to, I replied. The room went quiet. My daughter tried to smile. We were worried. No, I said gently. You were watching. Her smile faded. You're pushing us, my son said. You don't understand what you're risking. I looked at him. I understand what I've already lost. My daughter's voice shook. Why are you doing this? I took a deep breath, because love should not feel like fear. They exchanged a look. Then my son said something that made my hands go cold. If you keep acting like this, People might think you're not okay. There it was again. That threat wrapped in concern. I met his eyes. I already spoke to someone. His face changed instantly. You did what? He asked. I spoke for myself, I said. My daughter's breath caught. You weren't supposed to do that. That sentence told me everything. Silence filled the room like smoke. You went behind our backs, my son said. No, I replied. I stepped out from under yours. He stood up. This isn't over. I nodded. I know. They left the room shortly after, whispering urgently to each other. I stayed where I was, my heart racing but my spine straight. Because now the lines were clear. They were no longer pretending this was about love. This was about control. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. You should cooperate. This can still be handled quietly. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Quietly. I turned the phone face down and whispered into the dark. I didn't know love could hurt this deep. But now I knew something else too. Love wasn't the deepest pain anymore. The deepest pain was realizing how far they were willing to go. And whatever they planned next, it would not be quiet. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The message stayed on my phone all night. You should cooperate. This can still be handled quietly. I did not reply. I placed the phone face down on the table and sat there in the dark, my hands folded like I was waiting for something. For years, I had waited for love to soften, for voices to change, for care to return. That night, I waited for myself. The house felt different now. Not like a home full of memories. Like a place being watched. I locked every door before going to bed. I had never done that before. I had always believed love was my lock. Trust was my protection. Now I knew better. Sleep came in short pieces. Every sound pulled me awake. The wind, a car passing, the refrigerator clicking on. Each noise made my heart jump like it was preparing for something bad. When morning came, I sat up slowly and pressed my hand to my chest. My heart was steady, still mine, still beating. That mattered. I made breakfast but did not feel hungry. I ate anyway, forcing myself to take small bites. I needed strength. Even quiet battles require it. Around mid-morning, my daughter came into the kitchen. She looked tired. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't slept either. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Mama, she said softly, we need to talk. I didn't look up right away. I stirred my tea slowly. We've been talking, I said. She sighed and sat across from me. This has gone too far. I finally met her eyes. I didn't take it far. I stopped stepping back. She rubbed her temples. You don't understand how this looks. Tell me, I said. How does it look? She hesitated. It looks like you're not well. There it was again. That quiet push. I leaned back in my chair. Funny how I only became not well after I started asking questions. Her mouth tightened. You're twisting things. No, I replied. I'm finally hearing them clearly. She stood up suddenly. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Harder for who? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, my son appeared in the doorway. We need you to calm down, he said. I looked at both of them, standing there together, same faces, same tone. What you mean, I said slowly, is you need me quiet. That's not fair, my son snapped. Neither is planning my life without me, I replied. Silence fell over the kitchen. Then my son said something that chilled me. You're leaving us no choice. I felt my stomach drop. Choice to do what? He didn't answer. They both walked out of the room. That was when fear finally reached my bones. Not loud fear. Cold fear. The kind that tells you something is about to happen. I went back to my room and sat on the bed, my notebook in my lap. I read every page again. Dates, words, locked doors, threats wrapped in care. I realized something then. They were not acting like children, afraid of losing their mother. They were acting like people afraid of losing control. And people like that don't stop easily. Around noon, the phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at it for a long time before answering. "Mrs. Rayner," a man's voice said calmly. "I'm calling to check in." "About what?" I asked. "About your situation," he replied. "We've been informed you're experiencing stress." "Informed? By who?" "I'm fine," I said. He cleared his throat. "We'd like to schedule a visit, just to make sure you're safe." I felt my heart pounding. "Who asked you to call me?" "I can't share that," he said, "but it's in your best interest to cooperate." Cooperate. The same word from the message last night. "I will not agree to anything over the phone," I said firmly. There was a pause. "We'll follow up." The call ended. My hands shook as I set the phone down. This was no longer just family tension. This was escalation. I stood up and paced the room, my mind racing. I needed to think clearly. I needed help, but not the kind being forced on me. I picked up the phone again and called Bernice. "Liv," she answered quickly. "You sound shaken." "They're moving faster," I said. "They're bringing other people into it." Bernice was quiet for a moment. "Then you need to be visible, not hidden, not isolated." "What do you mean?" I asked. "People who plan in silence rely on you being alone," she said. "Don't be." That advice stayed with me. That afternoon, I sat in the living room instead of my bedroom. Curtains open, lights on, I made myself seen. When my children returned home later, they looked surprised to find me there. "We need to talk," my son said again. I nodded. "Then let's talk with the truth." My daughter crossed her arms. "You've been making calls." "So have you," I replied. She flinched. "You're turning this into something ugly," she said. I stood up slowly. "Love already hurt me. What you're doing now is something else." My son took a step toward me. "You're going to force us to do things we don't want to do." That sounded like a threat. I met his eyes. "You already did." The room felt thick, heavy. Then my daughter's phone rang. She stepped away to answer it, whispering urgently. My heart sank. When she returned, her face was pale. "They're coming tomorrow," she said quietly. "Who?" I asked. She hesitated. "People," she said, "to check on you." That was all she needed to say. I nodded slowly. "Then I'll be ready." My son frowned. "You don't understand what that means." "I understand exactly," I replied. "It means you think I'm weak." They both stared at me like they didn't recognize me anymore. And maybe they didn't. Because the woman standing in front of them was no longer begging to be loved. She was standing to be heard. That night, I packed a small bag. Not to run. To be prepared. I placed my notebook inside, my identification, a few personal things, proof of who I was. Before bed, I sat on the edge of the mattress and whispered. I didn't know love could hurt this deep. But now I knew something else. Love didn't hurt me anymore. Fear did. And fear only works when you stand still. Tomorrow was coming. And whatever they brought with them, I would face it awake. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I woke up before the alarm I didn't set. My eyes opened slowly, and for a moment I didn't know where I was. Then it all came back at once. The message, the call, the look on my daughter's face when she said, "They're coming tomorrow." Today was that tomorrow. I sat up in bed and placed my hand over my heart. It was beating fast but steady. I took a deep breath and whispered, "I'm still here." That mattered more than anything. I got dressed carefully, choosing simple clothes. Nothing loose, nothing sloppy, nothing that could be twisted into a story about me being careless. I combed my hair and looked at myself in the mirror. "You know who you are," I said out loud. The house was quiet, too quiet. When I stepped into the living room, my daughter was already there, sitting stiffly on the couch, her hands clasped together. My son stood near the window, looking outside like he was waiting for someone. Neither of them greeted me. That hurt, but not the way it used to. "They'll be here soon," my daughter said without looking at me. "I know," I replied. My calm seemed to bother her. She glanced up sharply. "You don't look worried." "I'm aware," I said. "There's a difference." She shook her head. "You always do this. Act strong when you should accept help." I sat down slowly in my chair. Help is something you offer, not something you force. My son turned around. "You're making this harder." "For who?" I asked. He didn't answer. A knock came at the door. 3 firm knocks. My heart jumped, but I didn't move. My son went to open it. 2 people stood outside, a man and a woman, both dressed neatly, both holding folders. "Good morning," the woman said gently as they stepped inside. "We're here to check in." "Check in." I stayed seated. They looked around the room before turning their attention to me. "Mrs. Rayner," the woman said, smiling politely. "How are you feeling today?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "I'm aware of where I am, who I am, and what's happening." The man glanced at his notes. "That's good," he said. "We just need to ask you a few questions." They asked about my age, my health, my daily routine, simple questions, clear questions. I answered all of them. Clearly, calmly, without hesitation. As they spoke, I noticed my children standing close together, watching my face like they were waiting for me to slip, to forget something, to stumble. I didn't. Then the woman asked, "Do you feel safe here?" I felt the room hold its breath. I turned my head slowly and looked at my children. "I feel pressured," I said. "That's different from unsafe." My daughter's eyes widened. "Mama." "I'm answering," I said softly. The woman nodded and made a note. "Has anyone made decisions for you without your consent?" the man asked. "Yes," I replied. My son stiffened. "That's not true." I didn't look at him. "It is." The room went quiet. I reached for my handbag and pulled out my notebook. "I've been keeping records," I said, placing it on the table. "Dates, conversations, locks, papers." The woman flipped through it slowly. Her expression changed. "This is very detailed," she said. "I wanted to remember," I replied, "because people kept telling me I was emotional." The man closed the notebook gently. "Thank you for sharing this." My daughter spoke sharply. "She's twisting things, she's sensitive." I looked at her then, really looked. "I raised you," I said quietly. "I know when you're scared." Her face flushed. "This isn't fair." "No," I agreed. "It is." The woman stood up. "We don't see immediate cause for concern here." My son's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "She's clear," the woman said, "and capable." Capable. That word landed softly in my chest. "We'll document today's visit," the man added. "If there are future concerns, they should be addressed with transparency." Transparency. They left shortly after. The door closed behind them, and the silence that followed was thick. My daughter turned on me. "Why would you say those things?" "Because they were true," I replied. My son shook his head. "You embarrassed us." I felt a familiar ache rise, but this time it didn't swallow me. "You embarrassed yourselves," I said gently, "when you decided love meant control." My daughter's voice broke. "We were scared." "So was I replied, "but I didn't try to take your voice." They didn't answer. That afternoon, they stayed quiet. No more lectures, no more planning, just tension hanging in the air like smoke. I went to my room and sat on the bed, my notebook in my lap. I realized something important then. They had expected me to fold, to cry, to panic, to agree. They had built their plan on the idea that love would make me weak. They were wrong. As evening came, my phone buzzed with a message from my daughter. We need time. I stared at it. Then I typed back. So do I. I placed the phone down and leaned back against the pillow. For the first time in days, my chest felt lighter. Not healed, but lighter. Because today, I didn't beg to be loved. I stood in my truth. And tomorrow, something would shift again. I could feel it. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. That night, after everyone went quiet, I stayed awake. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because my mind was finally still enough to think. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. For the first time in a long while, the silence did not feel like punishment. It felt like space. Space to understand what had really happened. My children did not mean to hurt me at first. That truth hurt almost as much as everything else. They loved me in the only way they knew how, by control, by decisions, by moving things around until they felt safe. They called it care. They called it concern. But love that takes your voice is not love. It is fear wearing a soft mask. In the early hours of the morning, I got up and went to the living room. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the streetlights fade as the sun began to rise. I thought about my life, every season of it. I thought about the young woman I once was, the mother who stayed, the grandmother who gave without counting, the woman who believed love meant silence. And I saw clearly now where I went wrong. I had taught them that my pain was something they could manage, that my feelings were background noise, that my love had no limits and no boundaries. I didn't know love could hurt this deep, because I never learned that love could also say enough. Later that morning, my daughter came into the room quietly. She looked smaller somehow, less certain. "Mama," she said softly. I turned to her. "Yes." She sat across from me, twisting her fingers together. "I didn't sleep." "Neither did I replied. She swallowed. "I thought I was helping." I nodded slowly. "I know." "But I didn't listen," she continued. "I decided." "Yes," I said, "you did." Her eyes filled with tears. "I was scared of losing you." I felt my chest tighten, but I stayed steady. And I was scared of disappearing while still alive. She covered her mouth, finally crying. For the first time, I did not rush to comfort her. I let her sit with the truth. My son joined us a few minutes later. He stood by the doorway, arms crossed, unsure. "We didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. "But it did," I replied. He nodded slowly. "We thought love meant stepping in." "And I thought love meant staying," I said. "We were both wrong." The room was quiet. Then I said the words that had been forming in me all night. "I love you both, but I will not be managed. I will not be spoken for, and I will not give up my voice to keep the peace." They listened. Really listened. "That's the only way we move forward," I continued. "With respect, or not at all." My daughter wiped her face. "I don't know how to do that yet." "That's okay," I said gently. "Learning takes time." My son nodded. "We need time." "So do I replied. That afternoon, they packed a few things and left to stay elsewhere for a while. Not in anger, not in silence, but with understanding. When the door closed behind them, I did not cry. I sat back down in my chair and let the quiet wrap around me. It felt earned. In the days that followed, I did small things for myself. I rearranged the house the way I liked it. I cooked meals slowly. I went for walks. I called friends. I spoke my name out loud. Olivette Rayner. I learned something important in those quiet days. Love does not have to hurt to be real. Love does not need sacrifice that erases you. Love does not ask you to disappear so others can feel comfortable. I didn't know love could hurt this deep. But now I knew something else. Love can heal just as deeply when you finally include yourself in it. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't staying because I was afraid to leave. I was staying because I chose to. If this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories like this. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Somewhere out there, I might be reading.